going to share my screen now. Hopefully you can see this coming up. Lewis, can you see my screen? Is that okay?
Sure can, Doug.
Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, so thanks very much, Lewis and Rebecca, for having me. Really pleased to be with you today to talk about how to set the price of your training course. Such an important subject at the moment, really for sort of two reasons. One is, well, we're going through some fairly difficult economic conditions. So it's really important that you're set up in terms of how you can boost revenue as much as possible. First, just a bit of a story. We had to do a house clearance recently, and two people came round, and one person gave an instant quote of £2.5 grand, and I said, "Oh, that's a bit expensive." He instantly went down to £1,500, and we had someone else come around the next day, quoted sort of £900. Seemed reasonable to me. I asked him sort of what the service was. We went through exactly what he would do in terms of recycling things, made sure the date was right. I felt like he was offering really good value, so I went with him. And the person that sort of instantly put their price down, it didn't feel quite right to me. So sort of perception is a really important part of price. So what are we doing for about the next 45 minutes? Well, we're going to be talking about how you can set prices for your training course, and it's very much for L&D people. First of all, I'm not a technical pricing guru, so we won't have lots of technical calculations and things like that. It's much more practical session on the things that you should be doing when thinking about price for your training course. And as Lewis said, I'm Doug Marshall. I'm head of Achieve B2B Marketing, and we're a specialist marketing consultancy for training companies. Now, none of what I'm about to tell you is prescriptive. Really, every different training provider has different audiences, has different sectors, has different products. So these are really ideas for you to really sort of just think about and put into practice. Now, what I'd like to do, let's try and make it as interactive as we possibly can. So during the session, if you can, write down some things you'd like to start doing, write down some things you want to stop doing, write down some things you're going to do differently, and do share the chat to share your thoughts about pricing and to ask some questions. And when you ask the questions on the chat, remember to click on everyone so we can all see it. And by the end of the session, I hope what you can do is write one thing you're going to start doing, one thing you're going to stop doing, and one thing you're going to do differently. So, Lewis, could we do the first poll, please? Really would like to know which of the following is the main decision maker for buying your training services. So is it people in L&D? Is it people in HR? Is it a department head, or is it an individual learner? So if you can just put down which for you is the main decision maker for buying your training services. I'll leave that running for a few more seconds, so get clicking. For me, this is always interesting to see kind of where decision makers are. Okay, that's brilliant. Thanks, Lewis. So I can see there, still going up. So L&D people are in the lead. That's interesting. So actually half of your main decision makers are in L&D. Only 2 of you put down HR. A third of you put down department head, and just 1 of you said an individual learner. So very interesting to know that 50% are L&D and a third are department heads. Thank you for doing that, Lewis. So I'll end the poll there. Oh, I'll share the results. Sorry, we didn't share the results. So there you can see the results there, showing that half people are in L&D and a third department heads. So thank you for sharing who your main decision maker is. So why are we going to look at pricing today? Well, There are storms brewing. Every time we look at the news, it's, oh, all these things going on. We're all going to be going through some fairly challenging times, I'm sure. Budgets are likely to be tightened. CFOs will be looking for their managers to see where costs can be cut. And I think all the predictions are this isn't going to be sort of short term. So we need to be prepared for the long term, and we need to really have our value story in place. And there's going to be two themes running throughout today. One is about value, and the second is about customers. I thought Matt, the last speaker, made a really good point about really having good customer intelligence, and that's going to be a thing we're going to be talking about today. So as well as these storm clouds, I don't want to be all doom and gloom, because pricing actually is a real opportunity for you. So well done for sticking around. The fact that you're interested in pricing means you've kind of got a commercial head on. And if we look at this, it's from a classic Harvard Business Review, which said that 1% improvement in price, assuming no loss of volume, increases profit by over 11%. Improvements in price typically have 3 to 4 times the effect on profitability as proportionate increases in volume. So you might be wondering, why is that important? Well, what that says is if you can get your pricing right, say you were to increase your price, it can have a disproportionate effect on your profit compared to, say, doing more sales, which might involve additional costs. And normally, you increasing your price won't necessarily increase your costs. So it can be quite a profitable way to grow your business. Important to say, when we're thinking about price, we can't think of price in isolation. It's got to be part of a bigger marketing mix. You know, you've got to have a product which is working well, which your customers are getting real value from. It's got to be in a place where they can easily find it and it's accessible. You've got to be able to promote it in such a way that the price represents the benefits that people are getting. So think about not just price, it's got to be in the context of a bigger marketing mix. Okay, we've got a quote here, which I really like about price. Only put a price in front of a client when you fully understand what is motivating them. So it gets back again to Matt's previous comment about having good customer intelligence. So I'd like you to just think for a second now, what's motivating for your customers to buy your training services? Just going to give you a few seconds to write down, if you've got a piece of paper, write down what is motivating your customers to join one of your training courses. I'm going to take a sip of water while you have a little think about that. We'll come back to that during this session. Here's another quote I really like. Price is what you pay, value is what you get. And price and value, they're absolutely entwined. So value is what it's like your client's calculation of benefits minus cost. And cost is not the same as price. Cost can be, for example, the cost of ending a contract or switching a supplier. And remember, the same learning service can have a different value for different clients. Okay, I'm just going to play this video now, and I can't remember, Lewis, if I did click that about the sound. I'm not sure I did, but I'm just going to play it now. So what I love about this advert, it was a Stella Artois advert, and it was all about showing kind of what value is.
Pour avoir un casse-croûte au jambon, s'il vous plaît. Ouais. Ça fait 10 francs. Je t'en prie, mon argent. Oui, ouais.
I love that advert. It's all about sort of thinking about value, and obviously uh, the champ's very thirsty, so to get the Stella Artois he has to exchange all the flowers from his flower stall. So it's thinking about kind of value is a really important thing when we're considering price, and winning or losing is really determined by value. It's not just the price. They're really kind of intertwined. So let's getting back to that question about only putting a price in front of a client when you fully understand what is motivating you. And I hope you wrote down what it is, and we'll be going back to that in a second and having a look at how you can think about increasing the value for your customers and therefore perhaps changing the price. Okay, we're going to do another poll now, which Lewis is going to do for us, which is I'd like to know who within your company decides the price of your training courses. So kind of, and if it's other, if none of these quite fit in, then feel free to put something in the chat, and do put everyone, click on everyone when you're thinking about that. So who within your company decides the price of your training course? It's really interesting to know who it is. Okay, I can see at the moment it's owners and decision makers. Owners are the top one. We've got quite a few there. So we'll end it in a second. Last chance to put your one. Is it the owner? Is it marketing? Is it sales? Who actually within your company decides the price of courses? Okay, so interesting there. What's interesting actually is you've obviously got a lot of owners quite rightly making decisions. So we're going to end the poll there, and I'm going to show the results. So you can see the owner is a big person who decides what the prices are. Sales making up a quarter, and only if you one of you said marketing. That's quite important. And I would say if you're a marketer, make sure you are getting involved in those pricing decisions, because it is important to get involved in pricing decisions. So I'm going to stop sharing that now. So thanks for putting your vote in. Okay, so where do you kind of start when it comes to setting a price for your training course? The first thing I would urge you to do is make sure you've got a clear value proposition, which really explains both externally and internally what value it is that you're offering. There's a thing called a value proposition canvas, which you can have a look at, which is a good exercise you can do internally to work out what the value is. But when we're thinking about value, it's really important, just as Matt said, to make sure that you're going back to your customers and making sure you're getting back to them to understand what the value is. So there are different things you can do, of course. You can look at things like feedback forms. Have you got questions on feedback forms or further interaction when you're assessing the value of courses, where you can kind of see some clear evidence that your training course is having a really good impact on the business? So first thing, think about value that you're offering. Second, think about your competitors. What sort of prices are your competitors charging? And we're going to look at value pricing in a minute and distinguishing it from cost plus pricing, so we can see what the difference is. But obviously a key thing is that when you've started to think about the price of a training course, do have a look at what your competitors are charging. I've been speaking to a lot of people in training about what they do as well, other things they do to get the price right. And a big comment was that people say where they've got customers they're friendly with, and when they trust them, it actually just does no harm actually chatting to customers, especially for new products, to say, what to you would sort of represent fair value, or, what kind of price would you think would be a good price for us to charge for this? So do consider it if you've got customers that you think are sort of a friendly and you can trust. Now, it's unlikely by doing these things you'll necessarily come up with something which is statistically significant, but I think it should give you a really good feel about sort of what the right price is to charge. Okay, what sort of things are there for you to avoid when doing pricing? I think there are some things which aren't just specific about price, but about your kind of business. So for example, if you have a lack of differentiation, if you can't say how you're different to other training providers, then you've got a bit of an issue. There was a training business I knew that they were doing a lot of face-to-face training, and a new digital company was doing a lot of virtual instructor-led training. There didn't seem to be a massive difference between the two offerings, even though one was face-to-face and one was online. And what that meant really was they felt that their training prices were becoming commoditized. They were having to reduce them because they couldn't find a way to differentiate them against some of their competitors. Second thing is an unclear value proposition. If you haven't written that down, if you're not clear about what your value is, it's very difficult to get your price right. That means you need to really have kind of defined personas. So avoid a situation where you haven't done personas, ideal customer profiles, if you like, where you know what their sort of pain points are and where you can link the value to their pain points and their challenges. If you do pricing that's too high, one of the problems you're going to have is lack of sales or needing to discount to bring those orders in. Customers might look elsewhere, and you also might find competitors are competing with you on price. If your pricing is too low, of course, there's a bit of a lack of revenue, maybe reduced profit, and also that perception. And, price is as much perception as anything. Stella did that whole campaign about being reassuringly expensive. So think about what the perception of your price is. And if you're pricing it too low, maybe that might affect the perception as well. So if we get back to value and things you're thinking about in terms of offering value to your customers, really like Donald Taylor's global sentiment survey that he does every year. And this one has some really interesting results. So it's surveys of L&D leaders, and we can see that L&D leaders represent half of your decision makers. This is kind of what some of the things are going on in their minds, what they're concerned about. And they're concerned about learner engagement, going or staying hybrid, showing value, as well as technology and budget and resources. So these are, and I urge you to dip into this survey to it gets in the head a little bit of what's happening with L&D managers. And so you can begin to think, okay, what am I doing about learner engagement? Are people actually engaging with my training course? Can I see good completion rates? Can I see impacts that are happening as a result of going on training courses? And am I helping, am I asking the L&D manager, what their challenges are? Do they want to go hybrid? Should we be doing more blended learning? Really making sure you are on that third point, showing value. Now, you might be thinking this is a bit simplistic, but we need to think of motivations of your L&D manager or the department head that's going to be buying your services, or the HR person. And in a kind of a lot of sales, it is really about fear and greed. It may sound simplistic, but sort of bear with me, because I've worked with training companies where that sort of fear element definitely is there. And you need to tap into that so you can define what the value is, and therefore what price you can offer. For example, in health and safety, the fear might be, I need to prevent accidents. In the world of compliance, it may be how I need to stay within certain regulations and not fall foul of certain regulations. Obviously, with the greed bit, well, it might not be greed, but it might be a need to increase revenues. But generally, the sort of human nature is that greed is that often can be a bigger motivation than greed. But there also might be other things you need to be thinking of in terms of how you can add value and therefore charge the price you want. And it's useful to know, again, what are these motivations? For example, is it all about improving performance, and what performances can you change? And then can you make sure you're tracking those improvements in performance? And it might be about staff retention. And then it's just making sure you're having a chat with the HR director, perhaps, to find out how you can actually help make sure that training is helping with staff retention. So there are kind of some different ways of doing pricing. I've worked with companies that adopt cost price. And cost price is quite a simple way of doing pricing, really. So you can think, okay, what are my costs? For example, with a face-to-face course, that might be what's the cost of the trainer, what's the cost of the venue, maybe the cost of refreshments. Okay, I need a 20% profit margin on that. Therefore, then I need to work out how many delegates I need to get to that required profit. And that can work absolutely fine. I've worked with training companies where that seems to have worked okay. But there are a couple of things you need to think about when you're doing cost plus. First of all, are you considering actually all the costs? And a common mistake can be you don't think of, for example, the sales and marketing costs of a training course, or maybe there's other costs and overheads you need to consider. And a second thing to think about with cost plus is it doesn't necessarily mean you're actually charging for the value that your customers, your trainees are actually getting out of the course. So there's a couple of downsides there to cost plus. Another way of doing it is actually with value pricing. So how do you do value pricing? Well, you need to first of all think about what the value is that you're offering. You need to, again, going back to that theme of value, knowing what value you're offering. Are you saving customers money? You're helping them make more money? What exactly is the value that you're getting out? They're getting out of using your learning services. And then, but you, as I said before, you do also need to know what your competitors are charging, because your customers will see things through a relative lens. You know, they're just like with me on the house clearance. They're going to be wanting to know what different people are charging. And therefore, if you've got a competitor charging a lot less than you, they're going to be wanting to know why. Is there any extra value they're going to get from your service if they're paying a higher price? So you've got to be thinking about the value you're offering, which is better than your competitors. And that enables you to set a price which is more based on value rather than cost. Now, question for you, are you a price taker or a price maker? And there's some things to consider with this question. Can get a bit complicated, but there are some things to think of. Now, this is a kind of a bit of an ideal world. To be a complete price maker, there are some ideal world things to think about, but the things you should be thinking about in your business. And as I said before, price isn't in isolation from other aspects. So you've got a much better chance of making a price rather than feeling though you have to take a price from the market. And that's if there's no close substitutes. If you've got a really unique product, if there's little or no competition, and if you're a kind of a leader in your particular market, if there's sort of inelastic demand where demand often remains constant despite price changes. So if you're going to be a company that can really decide prices, then these are some of the things you need to think of. My main point here is, again, don't think of price in isolation. There's lots of other things which enable you to set the price. Now, as I said, we are entering economically difficult times. I'm sure you've seen things on the news every day which makes you go like this. And you know, you might be having some difficult conversations with some of your clients over the next few months. Now, this is going to be quite long term as well. So I think there are some things you need to think about now. How can you sort of prepare yourselves for difficult times? And is your training, where does it fit on this dial, would you say? Is it nice to have, or is it must have? If it's just nice to have, you might become more vulnerable. But if it's must have, you might be in a stronger position. So I would urge you to think about, and maybe this is something to go back with colleagues now, think about how must have is our training. I'll give you some examples of some training which kind of really was must have. There was a healthcare training business I work with, and the training enabled their sales reps to go into healthcare settings and actually sell to people like doctors. It literally opened doors. I've worked for another company which provided really good training to compliance officers. And that was brilliant because it was helping also to professionalize that profession. And with news headlines about banks fining people that didn't follow regulations, the world of compliance was completely changing. And so things like compliance are thinking about how does it mitigate large risks. And you might be thinking about making sure your training either can help reduce costs or increase sales or increase staff retention, but you need to be thinking about where you are on that dial between nice to have training and must have training when you're thinking about price. I want to make a quick word about enterprise pricing. So a lot of people, they charge for individual courses. To individual people. We saw there were some people that were selling to individual learners. But if you think about enterprise pricing, this is packaging up a bundle of things and selling it at an enterprise. So for example, if you've got a multi-seat license that provides online access for 50 employees, but for the price of 30 individual licenses, you can see how that offers better value to the client whilst increasing your revenues. So if you're selling only to individuals at the moment, think about ways you can actually sell to an enterprise. That does require a different relationship. You have to build up a relationship. It's a lot less transactional, and you need to build that trust with the client, and it's slightly more long term. But it's definitely something to think about if you're only selling to individuals. Okay, something which is really important is A/B testing. So make sure you're testing your price. I'll explain some things you can do that. It's really sort of getting a sense of what works. So some things you can try. As I said, you can simply be asking some trusted people within the industry about prices. You can also do discrete promotions. For example, if there's a renewal coming up, you could try and test one price for some renewals and one on another. But you need to keep it discreet. But it is important to test prices from time to time. Now, there are some times where you should be charging nothing. Why should you be charging nothing, do you think? Well, here's just a few examples to have a think about. First of all, freemium. This is an example from a business called Smart Insights. They offer a free membership. You join up for the free membership, and then they'll tell you after that what the price is of having an upgrade. There are certain things for free, certain guides, but if you want to get some of the other learning, then you have to pay. The great thing about freemium is you begin to see behavior of the people that have taken out, for example, a basic membership. You can see the frequency that they're actually using your service. You can see the topics maybe that they're engaging with. And so you start to get a kind of sense of value of what they're going to get out of it. So freemium, definitely something to think about, particularly if you've got a lot of e-learning resources and courses. Offering a trial is another good idea. This is a company called Circus Street, where you can take out a free trial. Again, by doing that, you can get people to see the value of your service, and then you're more able to offer the price that you want to, because they've already seen the value they're getting from your service. A big conversation I often have with training companies whether to publish or not publish prices. I think for me it's still difficult to know. Be interested if you've got a point about that, and you can put it in the chat. And by the way, do put any comments you want in the chat. Some people say to me when I speak to training companies, it's a bit of a barrier, maybe a bit of a distraction before you want to have a conversation about the service, and that price feels a bit premature if you're publishing it online. Maybe you've offered different prices to different people for the same product, and you don't want to publish those prices. Also, prices can get a bit complicated, obviously. What's the reason for publishing prices? Well, if you do always actually offer the same price to different companies, then it can be okay. Certainly most customers I speak to, L&D for example, they want to know the price up front. So there is a kind of there's different thoughts on that. Really be interested in your thoughts on that. Just the thing about presenting prices, if you decide to publish your prices, it's really important, I think, to present it well. There's a couple of examples here. One is Future Learn. What I like here, it's very simple to understand. It's £19.99 a month. Subscribe to Unlimited, and you can kind of see what the price is very easily. And so I really like the kind of simplicity about that. Here's a company called Marketo. This isn't a learning example actually, but I just thought I would show it to you. There's some general things you can do when you're presenting pricing. One is called Goldilocks pricing, where there's the middle price. If you've got three, is the sort of just right price that you want to draw people to. There's a similar way of doing it called anchor pricing, where again you have one in the middle, and if there's a discount off of that, people are always thinking how those sort of two things compare. And what I like about this Marketo example is it tells you who it's for. So great for small teams, great for growth marketers, great for progressive marketers, great for advanced marketers. So maybe if you do that, you can sort of show why someone should go for a certain price. Okay, so I hope you've been doing this. If you haven't, have a think now. One thing you'll start doing, one thing you'll stop doing, and one thing you'd like to do better. And that'd be great if you could share that in the chat. Just choose one thing you start doing, or one thing you'll stop doing, or one thing you'd like to do better. I'd really like to know kind of what things you're thinking about. We'll come to the chat in a second. So we'll just say some sort of next steps. First of all, if you'd like to connect with me on Twitter, it's Doug S. Marshall on Twitter. Or if you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, it's just key in Doug Marshall, and you should find me in LinkedIn. Love to connect with anyone in L&D. I do a monthly newsletter called the L&D Marketing Monthly. It's got lots of sales and marketing tips actually. We usually include some pricing things in there. So if that is something you'd like to subscribe to, it's completely free. Comes out every month with lots of tips for L&D people with commercial responsibilities. And if you subscribe to that in the next couple of days, you'll also get this free guide. It's got lots of tips, 17 ways actually to boost revenues for your learning services. So if you just go to my website, achieveb2bmarketing.com/contact-us, or get your phone out and scan that QR code, then you should go to that page. And Rebecca might have also put the address in the chat. Lewis.
Doug, an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for that. I can only say thank you.
Fantastic.
Again, the chat is still open. There's a couple of links in there. A couple of questions actually. One from Rebecca, which I feel I'm sat very near her. I think you covered most of it further in your presentation after she'd asked it, which was around, the question was, for companies offering B2B training packages, at what stage would you recommend sharing that pricing? Publicly on the website, behind a form, or during discussions with potential customers?
It's a really good question. I don't think there's any wrong or right answer to it. So I'm not going to say do one or do the other. I think it does depend. I mean, for example, if you've got a very clear subscription model where it's a set price per month, then it kind of makes sense, I think, to show the price. I think if you've got a big history of discounts all over the place and actually different people have been charged different things, it does make it more problematic. So you need to think about some different factors before deciding whether you want to publish prices. I think if you can, it's a good thing to do, but I do speak to a lot of other training providers that say they don't want that to be out there. They really want other conversations to happen before it gets to price.
Makes sense. And then a great question actually from Georgia. How are you supposed to know what competitors charge? B2B costs are rarely shared on their website.
That's a really good question. Well, of course, first of all, do have a look on competitors' websites to see what they say. There's a kind of sense of getting sort of informal market intelligence, and that's by speaking to your customers. But there's I guess there's confidentiality there. Good question. I'd love to know what people think about how they do that.
Yeah.
If anyone's on the chat wants to put an idea about how they do that, that'd be really, really useful.
And then just to feed on from that question from Georgia, commented on the 3 things that you asked everybody to do. So I'll read it just for continuity.
Yeah.
So Georgia's put number 1, write down what you'll start doing, which is to think about a value story, which I think I can definitely relate with.
Yeah.
Number 2, what will you stop doing? And that's not having clear personas. And then 3, what will you do differently? Get a clearer value proposition.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. They're all good ones. Thanks, Georgia, for sharing that. And value propositions, they do take a lot of care and time. And if you look at value proposition canvas, that's one way of doing it. But they do require a lot of thought, actually, but they're really good to do. And in terms of doing personas or what else is an ideal customer profile, there's lots of templates you can get on the web. It's really thinking about, people do a lot of things on the demographics of customers, but really think about their pain points, and the best personas are when you've actually done the intelligence, just like Matt said earlier on, really know your customers, really ask them. So when you do an ideal customer profile, it's not just sort of plucked out of the air. It's based on real conversations you've had, and also doing things like looking on LinkedIn, seeing what people are saying, looking at surveys like the Donald Taylor Global Sentiment Survey. But speaking to customers is the best thing to do for that.
That's it, right? And asking if you paid, I guess, as well. What have you paid with alternative providers?
Yeah.
Or what have you been quoted? If you've got a good relationship and you've got that rapport.
Definitely.
Perfect. Well, I say, if anyone's got any other questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. But otherwise, thank